Hey there, everybody. Welcome to this walkthrough for our newest course, Ice Lair. I'm Lucas Martell, creator of Walkabout Mini Golf.
And I'm Don Carson. I'm one of the art directors here at Walkabout Mini Golf.
Let's give you a little tour. So as you can see, we wanted to start off a little different than many of our other courses. We have you starting out in kind of this barren wasteland. And the very first thing you'll see is that we've got something new on the green here. This course introduces an ice mechanic. So one of the things is that when you are a regular ball, your ball will not come to rest on the ice, so it really slips and slides all over the place, which creates some fun new mechanics-based holes that we haven't touched before. But there's also something else going on with the ice. So let's actually head into the base here, and you can see a bit more. So if you get close to the door here, you'll notice it start to ascend, and we can take the elevator down. There we go. There we go. Now we're inside the base, and you can see that we're kind of going in a very different direction. We kind of have this idea for the evil lairs that they each kind of have a distinct architectural style. So with this one, we thought, oh, we've got to go brutalist. Blade Runner was a great reference, just a lot of that sort of like that Soviet era sort of like giant subterranean base was sort of like really where we were going, but we really wanted to have some of this grand works of cement basically. And all of the holes sort of follow that same sort of like shape language that creates some really sort of like great bounce shots, unique angles. As we move on into the laboratory here, you'll also get your first glimpse of the Puffins.
Since we knew that we were doing villains layers and we knew we were sort of capturing the Bond villain feel, we needed something that really, really was a contrast to the laser layer. And also we tend to create very, very detailed filled empty environments that don't have a lot of characters in it, with the exception of Labyrinth. And so it was an opportunity of who runs this base, and we thought that this particular villain needed some minions, and what are appropriate minions for an Arctic ice lair, but seabirds from the area. And it's worth mentioning that originally we had drawn penguins, but penguins felt so done in the past, and Puffins seemed like an opportunity for us to kind of own a new look at Arctic birds. So that was the birth of the minions for Ice Lair.
Yeah. I also see you looking at this other big mechanic piece. If you haven't played and you want to, this is going to kind of ruin the experience, but for talking about it, there's no way that we can kind of hide around this. So when you putt through, your ball goes to the freeze ray and gets turned into an ice cube. And so this is the first time that we're massively, massively changing the physics on the ball. So from here on, it actually kind of works more like a hockey puck a little bit that will actually slide on the ice. So it gives it a very different feel. We spent a lot of time really dialing this in. And one of the other things that maybe I'll give away on an upcoming hole is also how that ice cube behaves when you are on the green. Because essentially starts bouncing a bit more like a dice, so there becomes a lot of strategy of like, oh, do you actually get cubed in order to be able to bounce off the green and skip over a barrier, or do you do you try to stay a ball because it's much easier to roll on green? All the holes are really kind of carefully designed around that mechanic in a super fun way. It actually took quite a while to really dial it in and make sure that it was still fun. But I think that people are going to love this one because, like the lasers, it's a little mean, and there's something about seeing someone get frozen when they didn't mean to that is just like watching your ball get chopped in half. It's sort of like this very communal sort of like, oh, we had a lot of fun being mean to players on this particular course.
The previous room and this room and subsequent rooms, we wanted to give you glimpses into other parts of the course. So you'll see windows that give you kind of a little bit of a peek at things that are coming. So there's a sense that this base is one cohesive area. We did the same thing for Laser Lair, where you're constantly going in and out of that caldera and getting different looks at it. So we did the same for the Arctic Ice Lair.
Yeah, this is probably one of the bigger courses that we've done as well. I think the whole reason that we started doing the Villains Lair courses was just because I think we've always wanted to build our own secret base. There's just something very something like a 4-year-old playing with blocks, just like, oh, here's where I'm gonna put my swimming pool, and here's where I'm gonna put my henchman quarters and all that sort of stuff. So
Right.
So here we're walking through the reactor room. Originally, we wanted so many puffins in here that just for pure production purposes, we also had to sort of like find a way to scale down the scope a little bit and make sure that it didn't become just sort of like, we have to actually release the course. The mini golf aspect of it is still kind of an important thing. And it's not all about the puffin gags, so those are pretty hilarious. So I think we found a really good balance of like adding props to them to sort of imply what they were doing. In fact, one of the things that you even notice is when you enter a new area, one of them sort of like calls out a warning, and then after that it just feels like they've all just sort of stopped what they're doing and acting more puffin-like. And I felt like that was a great solve to add some life to the world, but also not make us charge $10 for this course just to sort of like pay for all of the puffin animations that we wish we had been able to do. But hey, if the puffins become popular, I suppose we can always go back and keep adding more animations, though. So
That's right. Or at least release some plush.
yeah. I'll actually show this hole off because this is a great example that I was talking about earlier of this new mechanic. So as I putt here, you'll notice that once I get to the green, the ball as a cube actually starts to skip. So then the challenge really becomes more of oh, am I going to nail that? Almost nailed that on camera. That would have been a great one. But yeah, several of the holes also have a little hot, like we call it like a hot plate around them, so that if you get close, you're not having to try to tap in and deal with the dice bouncing. That was one of the big things that we found with beta testing, is that the act of like sinking a really close putt as an ice cube was particularly challenging. And yeah, the hot plates that melt it really, really help balance out the gameplay and make it a lot of fun. Jeff did a ton of sound design in here. The sound of the cavern, but also all of the other little bits and bobs that you hear. It's a very active environment compared to the other ones. I think especially because we do actually have the Puffin characters in here. As you walk up to this next door, you might even hear the sounds of banging, the sounds of construction that will go away as soon as we get close enough and the Puffins get alerted.
It's worth mentioning the genesis of the ice cube was during one of our design retreats. I think it was the retreat when we were meeting with Cyan to talk about the mist course.
Yep.
When we decided that the freeze ray would freeze your ball, we just jokingly said, oh, wouldn't it be funny if it became an ice cube? And I believe you went away, and about 20 minutes later, you had rigged up the mechanics as a test in Unity.
Yeah.
And we just laughed out loud. It was just such a funny way in which to interact with the ball.
I remember playing it just on my laptop through the headset and just like giggling very giddily because it was so ridiculous. And I think that was something that we really, like, this course needed, because we knew that we wanted to go with this sort of more cold brutalist, and we kind of needed the ridiculous aspect of the gameplay and the Puffins to sort of help balance that out. So it's still just a really, people don't necessarily want to spend, a ton of time sort of like underground, just if it's this sort of a, brutalist underground. It's really, really cool architecture, but we needed those details to bring it to life and make it a place that you want to spend time in and explore. I should also call out the music that Chris did for this. I feel like really helps nail that vibe. It has this Cold War, Eastern European sort of like flavor to it, but it also still brings back themes from the actual, from Laser Lair, sort of like kind of unifying them in a shared universe in a great way. I'm seeing that you're also noticing a bunch of the custom Puffin animations. There's a lot of details. I also love all of the the posters that were done where they had taken sort of all the travel posters from other courses and snowed them up to make them a little bit more hospitable. So here we're in the crew, or the Puffin Quarters. In fact, they even got a nest area in here. The one sipping on coffee is probably, or is that tea or coffee? Oh, it's coffee
it's
with the marshmallow.
hot chocolate.
Oh, hot chocolate. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they're just Puffins.
Yeah. Just normal, easygoing Puffins.
Innocent.
So we also, I would say probably more than any other course, I feel like this one had an even stronger storytelling idea. Do you want to talk about that with the villain and how we went about designing the course itself, Don?
Yeah, we're like I said, we're always trying to find contrasts, and in this particular one, while you had a villain who was potentially trying to dominate the world, this particular villain had decided that she had figured out how to solve global warming by freezing everything, and so she created this giant freeze ray that freezes everything. The Puffins are complicit in this endeavor for a while. That's all I'll say.
Oh, you're really not going to give it away. This would be hole 10, I believe. So this is the start of the back 9. We had to do our brutalist conference table. Mm-hmm. And we also had the idea that without also giving away too much of the story, that this base has been maybe lightly abandoned by its owner for a little chunk of time here.
We have a mental checklist of the kinds of places that one would imagine would be in an evil lair. So as we're designing this, we'll say, well, there absolutely has to be a sub-hangar. So there's a sub-hangar.
Of course. The captain also sipping on the chocolate, or the hot chocolate, is also one of my favorites. I think we kind of envisioned this as that this was an old sort of World War II era sub base that we sort of had been recommissioned and a bunch of stuff added on. So in here you see sort of the hints of the brutalist architecture, but it's much more practical. It's much more just metal, and then you get the grand edifices elsewhere in the level as it was added on to.
I personally like the contrast after having just released Around the World in 80 Days with all its sort of elegant, genteel detail to something that's as right-angled as this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's always I think something that we're always trying to do with the courses is to find that contrast between other things that we have done. You want to deliver on the promise of the premise, but also to kind of play with some looks and some styles that we haven't. And I think that's the thing that we're loving so much about the Villain's Lair course, is that it kind of it gives us license to do some broader things that are kind of specific, and especially the architectural elements that I think would be somewhat difficult to do without that. So welcome to the headquarters. I actually can't believe how cherried out all of this stuff became, and just all the details that were added. I love the thing that you had sort of said, Don, where we did actually borrow some pieces from the Laser Lair, that idea that all the villains get their equipment from a Villains R Us sort of
it's
some
villain,
sort of clearinghouse.
Villain IKEA. It's like IKEA for villains. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got whereas Laser Lair was much more sort of about the party, and aside from the giant robot, a lot of the evil plot was hidden from you. This felt like it needed to be more utilitarian, and we just needed to spell it out in, I was going to say crayon, but I guess probably red string would be a more accurate way of putting it. Mm-hmm.
Also, we feel that all the layers live in the same universe. And so this model here of the generator from the generator room actually appears in the Laser Lair as one of the exhibits in the hard mode a villain convention. So whenever we are ahead enough on a project that we can sneak in some hints at things to come, we'll do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this course wasn't like it came after Laser Lair, but I think we actually knew, like, we identified that, okay, we were going to do Brutalist, Freeze Ray, sort of like we had kind of like nailed that down about the same time. In fact, was that even the same retreat that we came up with both of them together?
Yeah, I think one right after the other.
Yeah, these were very much sort of like conceived in tandem, and yeah, we were going as much towards opposites and finding ways of contrasting, whereas this villain being much more reclusive and not necessarily the fun partying villain of Laser Lair.
Right, not a swinger.
Yeah, there also does seem to be a theme, whereas we had the giant robot in the first one. You got to have a giant freeze ray to counteract that.
Yes.
So,
going to dominate the world. You got to go big.
One of the other things that proved to be a lot of fun was just that, because I mentioned it kind of starts to act like a puck, it really kind of starts to feel like playing hockey a little bit. So we realized that once we finally got a room that had enough space, we just needed to do one that just feels like a giant hot ice rink almost, that you could really sort of like just have fun letting the ball bounce all over the place, or the cube rather. I should mention as well that we spent a good bit of time, like I said, tuning the physics. We actually made a couple of modifications not even that long ago, where am I actually going to make that? Same spot. We had actually a much more realistic version of the cube, and it would even like bounce off of the walls at weird angles. We ended up doing quite a bit of work to help the cube go more straight and to bounce off at more predictable angles, just because everyone kind of agreed that it was, even though it was super fun to see that level of accuracy, it just felt like it wasn't quite predictable enough. So we really tried to strike a balance between how realistic we were being with those cube physics and how much we were just making it behave like people expected it, a little bit more video game-y, and I think we found a good balance with that. So yeah. Well, this is actually hole 17 that I am standing over right here. And we probably won't give away 18, but if we can maybe just walk over to the windows and we can give another great little shout out to a couple of the other great work that, ironically, I kind of wish that we had featured it a little bit more, because we also realized this is one of the first times that we have this sort of like giant underwater that you're looking out. And so we were able to repurpose a lot of the stuff that we did for Atlantis. So we actually have a giant school of tuna out there. There's even a couple of orcas swimming around, as well as, I'm not sure if he's quite synced up, but of course you've got a couple of puffin divers that if we hadn't done Atlantis, we probably wouldn't have done all of that. But man, does it really make it add a lot of life to the course. So yeah, that's constantly something that we're trying to do and improve on, is to sort of give more life into these environments. And some of them just naturally lend themselves more to them than others.
When we do hard mode, often we're trying to keep the environment as similar as possible, but to make a large enough change that you feel like you're experiencing it again for the first time. And so since the Puffins are such a big part of easy mode, is there another way that the Puffins could express themselves in hard mode that made the entire experience of being here a little different?
Yeah. But Ice Lair is out now, $3.99 US. So yeah, can't wait for everyone to check it out and let us know what they think.